Humans of the cardboard, welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today I want to do an early deck building video kind of talking about RAIZEOL. I think this archetype actually has some real potential going forward in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so today I want to go through and talk about some of the ideas for deck building with this archetype. I think the core of the main engine, the RAIZEOL card specifically, I think that stuff ends up being pretty standard list to list for the most part. But when you start talking about other engines you can play in there, what extra deck choices you want to make with some specific things, and just some other generic cards as well, I do think you can kind of get into a discussion on what's going to be the most worth. So, without further ado, let's get into this thing. Let's get talking here. Let's start off, of course, with the RAIZEOL engine. This is pretty basic. Before we even finish this, though, I'm doing this kind of early. We are going to get most likely another spell card. It could technically be another trap, but I think it makes more sense for it to be a spell. That would be my guess. Revealed before RAIZEOL's even done with their first wave. So they do have one more card coming. That can change some things. We can talk about that later, though. As far as what we have right now, though, we start with the monsters. This is definitely the strong point of the deck, is the main deck monsters and the extra deck monsters. So you start with Ice RAIZEOL. This card can be a tour guide on normal, and it can also extend from the hand. It just doesn't tour guide if it's special, only on normal. That's the one clunky thing about this card, but still, the archetype doesn't really have a normal summon aside from this, so that's fine. Next up, you talk about X RAIZEOL. This is probably the best extender because it requires nothing. It can be a one-card combo on its own, or it can just jump right on the field because it summons by Foolishing any XYZ monster from deck. That's why we play the Myriologic Aggregator in the extra. We'll get to that later, though. And then on summon, he just searches, which one? He searches the other one. He searches a Fire Thunder, which is the other half of the deck on summon. It's a really, really good card. This is probably the best main deck monster, in my opinion. Then you have Sword RAIZEOL. This is another really good one. On normal or special, he adds a Light Pyro, which is either of these guys, which is really good. And if you already control a RAIZEOL on field or have one engraved, he just summons from the hand for free anyway. So he can extend and search. We're making like, Konami's just making this archetype like, sprites are just average now, right? Like Blue and Jet used to be like crazy engine cards. Now we just have those now. And this guy's good to normal summon anyway. So is this guy. So really good. Next up, you have Node. This is a really solid extender. If you just control any Exceed monster or have one engraved, you can just summon this card from hand, and then you can send any card from hand or field to the grave to just reborn a RAIZEOL from grave. Really good. It's just a pretty easy extender that's just getting you an extra body back. So it's a kind of a 2-for-1. You have to send something, but I feel like a good amount of the time you're going to be sending something that's not too crazy. It doesn't punish you too hard. And then the last one here is Palma. This is a one-of to me. Maybe. There's a world where you don't even play this at all. This card can summon itself by shuffling a RAIZEOL from hand or grave back into the deck or extra deck. And then if it battles, it does Foolish Burial is a level 4 and then gains attack. It's fine. The main thing with this card is that, like, sometimes you can just run out of names. He's one of the Fire Thunders, so if you already go through the first 2 Fire Thunders and, like, maybe you still have a search off of X, this card can be the final card you search. It's a simple extender. It's not a terrible extender for what it is, but most of the time I would imagine this card's just a level 4 body on the field to help you keep playing, help you keep extending. And so as a one-of, I think he still may come up. Unless later on we get like a card that's just clearly a better level 4 engine card that just kind of creeps this one out. But for now, I think it may still be a one-of in the deck. Next up, we get the Bonfire. This searches either Ice or X. These are probably the 2 best starters in the deck. So you can either search the starter or you can search the best extender. It's a pretty powerful card for the deck for sure. Hopefully this gets a reprint by the time this archetype is out in the TCG. We'll see though. RAIZEOL plugin, nice little quick play spell, just reborns basically a RAIZEOL card, or any Exceed monster or a RAIZEOL monster engrave or banish it. Special summons it, then you attach a RAIZEOL card from deck to it, so that's fine. This takes a little bit of setup. I would imagine most of the time you're just reborning like an older RAIZEOL. It's a pretty good follow-up card, right? Because that means you could just, even if you don't even have a way of making an Exceed, you could just reborn Duo Drive and equip it with something, and then just immediately search with Duo Drive for one of the 1-card combo lines and go from there. Or even one of your more powerful ones in the grind, like, oh, your opponent outed your Dweller early. Well, you can just reborn it, give it another material, and you're going to be able to Dweller them again. There's definitely stuff like that that's like not the worst. They do have a trap card. It's interesting enough, a whole normal trap card, so it does have really good synergy with Trap Tricks Rafflesia. It just pops cards your opponent controls up to the number of RAIZEOL XYZ monsters you control. It's going to be either 1 or 2 anytime you're activating it. I wish it just RAIZEOL monsters in general, but I'm still okay with Exceeds because you're usually trying to end on them anyway. And then Engrave it can quick effect Banish to just immediately Exceed summon using at least 1 RAIZEOL as well. So there are some interesting things that you can do with this card. 1 Gravedigger's Trap Hole. This deck really has no way to beat Nib if you don't play Rafflesia plus Gravedigger. So I think it may be a necessity if Nib is pretty prevalent in a format where this deck's, you want to mess with this deck. And that's basically it for the main core. We can get to the extra after where we'll talk about the extra deck cards. But as far as the next pieces, I want to talk about options you can do for the rest because I don't feel like this is quite enough to just play completely pure RAIZEOL without anything else. At least until we get something else revealed. Maybe it's the spell card. Maybe that changes something. Or maybe it's maybe down the line in the next core set or 2 that follow this archetype's release, do we get 1 or 2 new level 4s and then it's just all the way there. It's just a pure deck and that's the best way to play it. We'll see. But I think there are 2 particular engines that stand out to me above the rest. The first one is of course the Toy Box engine, where if you don't know, this is already about to see play with like White Woods and Centurion. It's an engine where you have Toy Box here. This card is a continuous spell. When you activate it, you can use one of its 2 effects. You can either set up to 2 toy monsters from deck to your spell and trap zones, or you can destroy 2 cards in your spell and trap zone. You're almost never using that second effect, other than like very specific scenarios. But the first effect, you're trying to set your toy soldier and your toy tank, who both say if they're sent to the graveyard while they're in the spell and trap zone, they just immediately special themselves back to the field, which is 2 level 4 bodies, and then Toy Soldier on summon either searches Toy Box, or if you already control Toy Box, you can just search any level 4 light monster, which in our own archetype already, we have Ice RAIZEOL and X RAIZEOL as 2 level 4 lights to search. You could also play something crazy like Thunder King Ryo for like maybe a turn where you don't even normal summon and you just search Ryo, normal him, or even the Light Barrier statue as well. There's definitely some those are definitely some options you can do as well as like spicy one-ofs, or maybe you side them for going first when you know they're like insane in a matchup. There's definitely some extra options there for sure. But really solid. What I like about this engine is that technically none of these cards are like dead. Right, like drawing in, there's no like full-on brick. You don't want to draw tank or ideally soldier, but if you draw soldier, you normal him, you search Toy Box, and you're at least getting like the 2 4s out of, you know, this engine, right? Whereas if you open tank, you're just setting it and you're probably sending it off of node to get it back, and it's just a simple level 4 extender. Not good by any means, but it's like it's fine. You're making use of it at the very least, and you're getting pretty like cost efficient, you know, payment for node's effect. So that's fine. I just like that there's no bricks. The one thing there's one small gripe I have about this engine as an assisting engine is it doesn't do anything on its own. It literally doesn't. Even if you open the best card, which is Toy Box, you just set the other 2. You need to get into the RAIZEOL engine to get to either Ice or Node to be able to send your toys. And so that's where it gets a little clunky for me, is that you still have to open this with the RAIZEOL cards and at least get to Ice or Node specifically. It's not like every single one gets you a send, it's just those 2. So even if those get hand trapped early, you still may not be able to find one of the ones that sends. So the engine is still a little bit clunky, but I do like that it's clean and there's no like hard brick for it. The other engine that I think is probably the best engine to look at, or one of the 2 best engines to look at, is Centurion. This engine's pretty cool. This deck is actually known right now for being like a synchro strategy, not exceed base, but they have 3 separate level 4s that jump on the field pretty easily. So I think as far as an engine goes, I think this is the type of engine that makes the most sense for sure, is 1 Primera, 1 Trudea, 1 Atri, the new one that just came out in Infinite Forbidden, and 3 Emblema Oath, and 1 stand-up. The reason this is the best way to do it, I think, is because Emblema is clearly the best one because it doesn't take normal summons. You can kind of get into some bodies without even normal summoning, which is really nice. And so basically, the reason, okay, so here's the payoff, right? The trade-off, I guess, with the toy box engine. The toy box engine doesn't do anything on its own, whereas this engine is all about just getting you to a rank 4 with an extra body later, which is nice. The trade-off is that you do have to play one A-tree, which is technically a brick. It doesn't really do anything on its own. You have to have a way to put it into the spell and trap zone for it to be an extender. Otherwise, in this deck, you don't always have to normal in this deck, so this can just be normal summoned, or this can just be ascend off of ice or node. So it's like not the worst thing in the world anyway. You can at least use it as discard fodder. Other than that, though, you do have similarities with the Toy Box engine, where Emblema is clearly the best card. That's why we play 3 of it. So that's the one we want to open the most. Same thing as Toy Box. And then I would say Primera, Trudea, and Stand Up all take your normal summon. So... or at least to like use them in a line, they would probably take your normal summon, which means they are more akin to Toy Soldier or Toy Tank. The difference is they still make you a rank 4, like just by themselves. So the reason I like that is because if we can just make a rank 4, we just kind of play. Because if you can just make a generic rank 4, you make Duo Drive, and he's going to search any 2 RAIZEOL cards, which means you're off to the races, because you'll be able to search, X and Sword, and then boom, you're getting 4 bodies basically out of those. You're making 2 more rank 4s on top of that, which is pretty dang solid. So that's the difference, is like these actually boost consistency. They may have a little bit of extra clunk to them just with like the A-tree and having like 3 of them kind of mid ones to see, but they're not dead. They're actually like still solid. Whereas the toy engine is a little more concise, but still needs to be seen with the RAIZEOL package. I don't know entirely which one I like more than the other, but I'm throwing it out there. Shifter, like this is just something a lot of people have noticed, that like none of these cards really do much in the grave. The only things the deck really does in the grave is stuff like X, sending an Exceed monster from deck to extra deck. It cannot do that under Shifter, so this is the one card that gets hindered the most with Shifter. But other than that, basically every other card just kind of, like Node isn't reborning anything, but if you're able to like Shifter your opponent, like sometimes Shifter is strong enough that like minimizing your engine a little bit to basically kill your opponent's entire engine can still be worth it. Not entirely sure if it's actually going to like make it into the deck, but that's just something to make note of. Finishing some main deck choices that are kind of interesting. Mudora and Keldo could technically be played in this deck. They are level 4s, so worst case scenario, you can just normal summon them as a 4. But also, again, you send off Node, you send off Ice. Just sending these to grave in like certain matchups, these could easily be sideable, like a one-ofs, both of them, just to like side them in. If you see them, you dump them. You can technically still dump them off of Palma's effect as well in the battle phase. That could come up in the grind game. Like you play against Snake Eye, you send one of those, and then you're just like, you go battle phase with Palma, attack something and send him, and then boom, banish 3, and now you're actually like kind of hurting a lot of their follow-up too. Could be pretty nice. So those are cool. Aratama and Sakitama, these could be another engine that you look at here, because Sakitama is just a decent little level 4 extender to just help you keep pushing. It's not crazy because it's just one level 4 body, and this is definitely a deck that kind of appreciates one card rank 4s. But our Aratama is, right? Because Aratama is just searching Sakitama out and going from there. The only thing I have questioning Aratama is like clunking up with normal summon monsters a little bit. Sword is not like that bad, but like in a specific hand, if you just have like Sword and Aratama gets like impermed, you do just like kind of pass. And no matter which one you normal, if they get impermed, you kind of pass. And then the other one's not really an extender. So that's definitely something you need to keep in mind, but it may be a small enough concern where you still maybe could find a world where you're like, 3 Aratama, 2 Sakitama, boom, let's hit it. And we'll play that over the Toy or the Centurion engine. It's clean, no bricks, and they help you put rank 4s out. 7 Tachion's interesting as well. There's a world where, like, as a pure variant, you could just choose to play 3/7 Tachion as well, because with this card, you can search any of the RAIZEOL monsters. It's just a -1, and in a deck that, like, doesn't need to minus you cards and actually does pretty good job at plussing you pretty hard, you maybe don't want to play a card like this in here. But it is an option, and it does search like most level 4 monsters in the entire game, and this is a deck that is only summoning Exceed, so the restriction doesn't matter. So It's interesting to note. And then there's Prosp. Prosp as well is another card where, like, even if you choose to play Aratama, the Spirit Engine or the Toy Engine, they're small enough where you could still play 2 or 3 copies of Prosp if you're still worried about consistency and you want to just have those next couple cards just to guarantee you. You can see how many one-ofs are in the extra deck. They are not all mandatory in every duel. There are definitely going to be matchups where you decide that 4 or 5 of these cards are just, you're never summoning them in a certain matchup. The most important ones are Do or Drive and Detonator for sure. Probably Rafflesia as well going first, and then these other ones are really matchup based after that. So, yeah. And there you go. That's basically it for the main deck options. As far as the extra goes, you have Duo Drive. This card's insane. It buffs itself. It gives itself an extra material, which does matter in the long run, and also searches 2 every single turn, basically. This card is crazy, for sure. This is definitely the biggest choke point in the deck, but I still think the deck has good enough ways to play around this card getting hand trapped that we might be okay. And then Detonator, there's actually a pretty good end board piece. It reads like a pretty mediocre end board piece until you realize its interruption effect is just not even once per turn at all. It's like a better Ghost Ogre, and it's not once per turn. It's however many materials you have, and on summon it also gives itself an extra material. So this card has 3 pops basically, and gives protection to other Exceed monsters. It's definitely an annoying board piece, and it's 3,000, so you can't just like clear over it very easily. Rafflesia, protection from hand traps, also still an interesting interruption. Spicy enough, like, you could even make this turn 1, use it to stop like a nib by sending Gravediggers, and then you still have Hole Thruster in the deck. So you could also then, if you just control another RAIZEOL, this can also just quick effect pop 1 or 2 cards because you still have Hole Thruster in the deck. It's a really cool synergy. I think this card feels like a must play in the deck, if I had to guess. Giant Hand. The rest of these are all just like Giant Hand, Baguska, Dweller, Steel Swarm Roach, Tornado Dragon. All 5 of those, literally you could argue one or the other. Like I don't know whatever it is. It just comes down to whatever the matchup is. I could see any of these being better in certain matchups. Like Giant Hand and just random matchups where like decks don't care. But like Baguska's weird in the deck because obviously putting Baguska in defense turns off your whole board as well. But there may just be situations where all you're able to do is make 1 rank 4, and Baguska's actually like the best option. But there's a lot going on here. These just kind of cover all your bases. You could easily swap out 1 or 2 of these for something down below if you feel like they're better, but these just kind of cover a lot of the bases. Laplacian's kind of cool as well. This is a generic rank 4 that if you can just make it with 3 materials, you can get a hand rip, send a monster from field, and send a spell or trap from field all at the same time. It's pretty cool. Yeah, card's just fine. It's kind of like a pseudo Trishula. And since it's rank 4, this deck can kind of use it. It's not a bad card in like a mid-board state to try and just erase all of your opponent's advantage all at once. Evilswarm Exciton Knight. It's just worse Zeus, but because this deck locks you into rank 4s, this could come up. If you're just playing through stuff, and you're able to just get to that last rank 4 to clear a board, that actually could be like kind of nice. Or sometimes certain decks and certain players just will not be ready for a card like this. Once this card hits the board, it's already live to like start doing stuff. So, especially, during your main phase. So it can definitely catch somebody off guard and then they don't have a response to negate it and you just trade with them. And this could be the first rank 4 you make and you still have plenty of gas in hand. So that's cool. Aggregator, this is for your RAIZEOL. When it's sent to the graveyard, it targets a card on the field and negates it to the end of the turn. Really, really solid because you get it in rotation. It makes RAIZEOL a card going second that actually like plays through interaction or at least baits extra stuff. And 2, once you get it in rotation, your RAIZEOL Exceeds, they're all about just equipping any monsters from grave to them as material. So you can equip Aggregator to Detonator, and then when Detonator pops something on your opponent's turn, you detach Aggregator and negate something else. So you add another interruption to everything else you're doing. Really good. And then Zeus. I don't expect to use Zeus too much because you do lock yourself into rank 4 specifically, but on a follow-up turn, right? Like just your opponent realize they can't break the board fully. They kind of have to give you a little room. You could definitely find yourself in a position where you can just go battle phase immediately and make Zeus wipe the board, and then if you have gas in hand, then you just rebuild a board completely after you kind of took care of the annoying stuff they had on field. I could still see it coming up enough to play it as a 1-up for sure. And then the rest of the extract stuff that I think is interesting that you should definitely at least consider. The Utopia double package is really scary. Like, honestly, this is a card that a lot of people are going to forget about. And if this card is not, if this archetype is not like super prevalent in the metagame, people will just not be ready for this. Kind of similar to Exciton Knight. Like, they're never ready for it because they think like, oh, like he can only make a rank 4 now. There's no rank 4 that does enough to me right now. I have so much follow up coming. And then as soon as you make this guy Utopia double, they immediately look down and realize they have a monster in attack position with less than 2,000 attack, and then you OTK them. Right? So the downside is obviously you have to play the 1 brick in double or nothing, hard brick in the main deck double or nothing, as well as 2 extra deck slots, which, you know, forces you to cut 2 things from here. But it can secure some easy wins for sure that you otherwise may not be getting. So yeah, could be worth. Infernal Flame Banshee, this card seems like a card that would be good here, but then when you actually look at like what we have available, it really isn't. Because it's like, why would you ever make Infernal Flame Banshee when you can when you're just could make Duo Drive? You know what I mean? In Search 2 rather than Search 1. And especially since the deck locks you into rank 4s, not just Exceeds in general. I wish it did just only lock in Exceeds. That way we could still play like the Armor Exceed package, and Zeus would be so much better in the deck because you actually be able to make it turn 1 and stuff after you've done your engine stuff. But because like once you make this card and you detach the Search, it just sits on board. And it's like if you're making because then you don't want to make 2 of those that do that, right? Make Duo Drive, Search 2, then make Flame Banshee, Search 1, and then they both just sit there because you have no way to clear them off the field. It's so awkward. It's not good. So like it seems like a card that could be good in the deck, but I don't think it is overall. Tellarknight Ptolemaeus, this can help you make either Pleiades or Constellar Diamond. It is 3 extra slots though, and even then, like a Constellar Diamond with only 1 material is just not that strong. Same thing with Pleiades, that it's like you're just basically making a rank 4 that's like 1 bounce. It seems so mid, honestly. I don't see it fully. So I don't get it. Gaga Cowboy, this could be in the main or in the side as a time win condition, potentially. Just keep an eye out for that. This is probably the best deck ever to attempt to abuse Gaga Cowboy, which is funny. Gallon Granite I thought was also interesting. If you just already play Nib in your deck, you can just search Nib. So it's a way for this deck to also build boards in a way where you don't have to commit quite as much of your board to just all on the field. It does feel like a good amount of this deck's boards just end up being like 3 Exceed monsters on the field with Hole Thruster set. So stuff like Evenly Matched, stuff like, you know what I mean, just like Raigeki are quite annoying to the deck. So this is a little bit safer of an option to just have like a really powerful bomb hand trap like Nib loaded in hand to at least deter your opponent from killing you at the very least, and hopefully give you a turn later on. I don't think there's many like engine rocks, like level 4 rocks, that really make that much sense off of this card, so it really feels like mostly just Nib, but maybe there is a 4 that's like kind of interesting. I don't know off the top of my head. There's the Tackle Crusader. I think he's level 4. When he's sent to grave, I think he just Book of Moon's a monster, so that's kind of neat in the same way that Aggregator is neat, that like if you just get him in rotation and have him as material on one of the guys that can detach on the opponent's turn, he's going to trigger. Like that could be something. I don't know. And the last one here is Full Armored Utopic Ray Lancer. Pretty easy because you can just search Hole Thruster off of your Duo Drive, and because it has the quick effect to Exceed on the opponent's turn, like it still gives you value in grave, so you could just pitch that immediately to make a Full Armor Utopic Ray Lancer for scenarios like where you're going into battle phase and you really want to handle stuff. This is a very particular card. It's not going to come up too often, but like if you're locked into rank 4s, this is a decent like utility card. You know what I mean? That allows you to kind of work around certain annoying situations. So that's kind of cool as well. But yeah, I mean, this is most of what I saw as far as like the options that made the most sense to me. I think this deck's really cool. I'm actually excited to mess around with it. I think a lot of people kind of been poo-pooing it because it's pretty like linear. I thought Math Mech was really linear. I thought Sprite was pretty linear. A lot of people love those decks as well. It is what it is. Yes, it's linear, but it's strong enough, I think, and especially since it's going to get 1 more card and then like support in the next 2 sets as well. I think this deck actually has a chance to kind of float around as a solid rogue deck. So I'll definitely be paying attention to it and at least giving it a look on my end. But that's all I have for today. Again, this is just a really early start to deck building and just some ideas on a bunch of cards and directions you can take the deck. Nothing super concrete, but just ideas forming. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, though. I know this video is kind of long, and I've kind of been going through a lot here of stuff, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down below if you have any ideas for the deck. If you want to, if there's any other engines you think could work. I think the Super Heavy Samurai engine could work. The problem is it just feels like it's this very similar to Centurion, but like worse bricks, basically. It's kind of like where I kind of landed on it. But, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, but let me know your thoughts down below. Any specific cards you think the deck can utilize, or engines in general, extra deck cards that I didn't show off here that you think also could have a spot in the extra deck. I'd love to hear any ideas here for the deck. But I am out of here for today. Thank you so much for watching. As always, guys, subscribe to the channel for more stuff from me down the line. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.